You're listening to a fight against free kill laws from AMP Media Production Studio.
Welcome to the Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar, where we give a voice to those who have suffered firsthand from medical malpractice. In Florida, families devastated by medical negligence are left without justice because of a law many don't even know exists. Florida's free kill law prevents families from holding doctors accountable. These are real stories with real loss and no justice. Contact Ed at 561-239-2417 or visit afreekill.com. Today we uncover the truth, share real stories, and demand change.
Good evening, friends, and once again, thank you for taking the time to listen in. What we're going to do this evening, we're going to talk kind of a recap of some of the stories we've had so far. We have, any of you who have been following, know that there are just some very heart-wrenching, compelling stories out there. And quite a few people, from what we see and our viewership and followers, are relatively new. So I've asked these wonderful people here at AMP2 Media to, kind of make a catalog of the YouTube podcasts, the podcasts we've done that are available on YouTube. But I want to go over, just give a brief summary of some of the people we've had already. And then at the back end of the show, we're going to talk about what our plans are for the coming legislative year. One of the very first people we had on the show was Cindy Jenkins. And Cindy Jenkins, those of you, again, who have been following know that she is a warrior. Cindy lost her beautiful daughter, Taylor, who had just turned 25, engaged to be married. A beautiful, beautiful young lady. She was violently rear-ended in an automobile accident in the Orlando area. Taken to a hospital where, she was unconscious at the time of the accident. Taken to the hospital, and the initial diagnosis was traumatic head injury. Well, it turns out that was completely false, and she actually had a tear in an abdominal artery. And by the time the correct diagnosis was made, it was too late. Now, to compound things and to make things worse, the hospital tried to hide the actual cause of death. The report, the autopsy report, everything was wrong. Cindy had to go on her own and get her own autopsy to get the correct diagnosis. And even with this, now this, you've got to believe borders on criminal law. This is a criminal, becomes a criminal case. But she could not get any legal representation, again, because her daughter fit the profile. And you hear us talk about the profile over and over. If you're over age 25, if you have no dependent children, you have no family member, no loved one has any recourse for compensatory damages. There's no monetary compensation for that. But even worse, there's no accountability, because if there's no litigation, there's no accountability. That was our first guest. Then we had Melody McDonald. Melody McDonald, she's actually the lady that started the Florida Medical Rights Association. And her mother passed, and her father, in the same week, was so torn, so heartbroken. He had to be hospitalized. The hospital's answer to his emotional condition was sedation. And, please listen to Melody's full interview. I think it's show number 4 on our YouTube channel. Her father's parting words, the last words he ever said to her was, "Please get me out of here. They are going to kill me." And less than 12 hours later, he was dead. Again, he fit the profile. Show number 5, we had Dr. Allison Ashley. Her father was a COPD patient. You know, he had COPD, but it takes a special skilled physicians to manage COPD properly, even when they're hospitalized, and a series of medication errors, I believe, again related to sedation, resulted in her father's passing while a patient in the hospital. In the interview she did with us, she referenced a book by a PhD by the name of Gary Null, who wrote a book, Death by Medicine. And she also brought a term to our attention that everybody that follows this effort should be aware of. It's iatrogenic death. That's IATROGENIC, iatrogenic death. And what iatrogenic death refers to is any death caused by medical intervention at the hands of here, according to AI, it's a fatality caused by medical intervention, including medical error, medical negligence, or known side effects of treatment. And when I first got involved in this effort to get this draconian law repealed, my research took me to a study that was done at Johns Hopkins University. I believe it was around 2016. And their study indicated that there are someplace around 400,000 deaths per year in the United States that are iatrogenic deaths. Now, think about that. And a lot of researchers and analysts think that number would be much higher if the CDC actually had a code for medical error. They do not. Again, going back to my son's passing, on his death certificate, there was nothing about medical error on there. On our 6th show, we had Jana Ben Nun and her son Ethan. Jana's father was treated by an unsanctioned therapy for COVID outside of a hospital by 2 physicians. Now, these people had to have been operating outside of their scope of practice. Yet, because her father fit the profile, they found that there was no recourse to try to claim any sort of judgment, any sort of justice for that death. We had a Linda Lohman from the Orlando area. Linda had her daughter Paige, a beautiful, beautiful soul, but a special needs patient. And she, because of the nature of her condition, she was prone to hydrocephalus. She had been a twin, and the twins were born prematurely. The twin sister did not survive, but Paige did, and she grew up to be a beautiful, beautiful young lady. She had friends, she had a boyfriend, she was functional. She went into the hospital for treatment of her hydrocephalus. Now, this is another issue with the healthcare system. She became, very, very, she declined to the point where they wanted her transported by EMS from the home to the hospital. But because she had become adult age, the EMS followed their protocol and took her to an adult hospital. Even though she was in her early 20s, because of her condition, and she had only ever been followed by pediatric neurologists and pediatric vascular surgeons. In spite of that, she was taken to an adult ICU. The timetable in which she was treated was not appropriate. It was wrong. The delay in getting her the proper treatment eventually resulted in her death. And show number 12, Stacy Warner. She is from the Fort Walton area. Her brother, a Marine veteran, honorably discharged from the Marine Corps, served honorably in the Marine Corps, was in a motorcycle accident. In the motorcycle accident, he went over and he broke his leg, and it was a severe break. It took 3 days before they finally set the brake. And you can imagine, the treatment that he had to get certainly, again, involved opioids. Somebody failed to recognize the fact that her brother was also treated for OSA, obstructive sleep apnea. And the treatment for obstructive sleep apnea in his case was a CPAP device, non-invasive ventilation. Somebody blew that, and he was given the sedation, which depresses the respiratory drive, and CPAP was never applied to him, and he died during the night in his sleep. A Marine veteran. In show number 15, we had Veronica Morrison from the Miami area. Veronica's sister was a 20-year vet of the Army. She was a master sergeant in the Army, served honorably, and was discharged when it was learned that she had early-stage ALS, and that the determination in the Army was that it had been service acquired. Something that was involved in her service led her to become symptomatic with ALS. At the time that she got so that her breathing was becoming impaired and she felt she had to go to the hospital, they called EMS. They requested, now they lived in North Miami, they requested that she be taken to the VA hospital, which at the most would have been maybe a 40-minute ride. EMS insisted that they had to take her to the nearest hospital, which was in North Shore where they lived. She wasn't managed properly, and again, listen to her the full story with her, but her sister ended up passing away, and it was completely preventable. On show number 11, we had Lori Korienko and Beth Potts. Lori lives in the Melbourne area, or Lauren, lives in the Melbourne area, and she and her sister are both very, very involved in this movement, and this resulted from the death of her father. And her father had been a very healthy man in his 70s, very active, very physically healthy. Again, medical mismanagement, medical error in a large hospital in the Melbourne area. And again, a death that was completely preventable. In show number 18, we had Mary Jo Rees. Her father went for what was supposed to be a relatively minor surgery, mitral valve repair, I believe. And they told him it would be about a 2-hour procedure. It ended up being much more involved. The physician even admitted that an error had been made. The response that they received from the hospital staff was very cold, very calloused. You can speculate. I do. I speculate on this. If they realized that he fit the profile, then might there have been some motivation not to pursue him as vigorously as they would another patient with another condition. In show number 21, we had Teal Greeter. This was in the Sarasota area. Teal's beautiful mother. She was full of life. She loved life. She sang. She played with kids. She skateboarded. She was a woman that was just full of life, loved her family. She had a perforated bowel. Should have been no big deal to take care of. But through a series of errors, mismanagement, and medical error, she developed an infection that she couldn't recover from and eventually passed. Karen Aguilar. Karen is in Wesley Chapel, I believe. Her father, again, full of life, loved his family, very involved with his kids and his grandkids. He fell. He had a fall, and he was complaining of a little pain. He and Mary Jo decided, well, let's take you to the emergency room just to have you checked out. They even stopped to get a bite to eat on the way to the emergency room. The ER physician convinced him that he should probably be admitted for observation. During the course of that overnight observation, a nurse determined that he was agitated and sedated him with a medication that never should have been used for someone in his condition. He had pre-existing atrial fibrillation. A long series of errors led to his having to be transferred to an ICU. And again, through a series of calamities, he succumbed and died. Show number 27. We had Katie Cowart. She's an RN. Her mother had moved to the Sarasota area. She also was supposed to be hospitalized for just a very minor cardiac procedure. Again, they told her, it'd be approximately 2 hours or so, and she would be fine. 2 hours went to 4 hours, 4 hours went to 6 hours, 6 hours went to 7 hours. Finally, someone came out to talk to them. And when the physician came out, as Katie recalls, he had blood on his shoes. He was shaken, visibly shaken. And he said that there had been complications in the surgery. And he indicated that there had been a laceration in her father's lung. Now, this was going in for a cardiac procedure, but there was a laceration in the lung, which he seemed to attribute to a mismanagement of the breathing tube, the endotracheal tube. Now, folks, I've been a respiratory therapist for a long, long time. There is no way that story could be true. Her condition progressed to the point where they actually had to put her father on ECMO. It stands for extracorporeal membrane oxygenation. And it's just a system where they bypassed the lungs and feed the blood through a membrane system to oxygenate it and replace carbon dioxide, just bypassing the lungs. A very complicated, a very expensive procedure. And a procedure that your chance of surviving this are better the sooner you can come off. He was on ECMO for 12 days, and he succumbed and died. We have some other stories. Elsa Peterson. Elsa's beloved son, Jim, had asthma. He was having some anxiety, getting his life in order, starting a new job, started expressing some distress. They sent him, he went to an urgent care felt that he needed to go to a hospital. Hospital over treated him in their opinion. Again, long story short, now this was during COVID, and Elsa, even though she was his power of attorney and his health care surrogate, she had some medical background herself, but she was not allowed to come in to see him. By the time she was allowed to come in to see him, he had declined to the point where they put him in an intensive care unit, where he eventually suffered a cardiac arrest and passed. We have Austin Hodge. Now, Austin's story is ongoing. We're hoping that we're going to have Austin and his mother on our show at some future date. But in the podcast where Austin did appear, Austin, again, served in the military, honorably discharged, and became a firefighter paramedic. He is also a respiratory therapist. His younger brother wanted to follow in his footsteps, also became a paramedic. His younger brother, on a call where they were working with someone who had a pulmonary condition, shortly after that, his brother, Jarius, became ill and felt that he had to go to the hospital. In the hospital, he declined rapidly. He had multiple systems failure. His blood count was diving. But the thing that was glaringly obvious was the fact that it took them 3 attempts to establish a proper airway so that he could be ventilated properly. As I said, whether it would have made any difference or not, it never should have happened. And they're looking into this, is still ongoing. The most recent guest that we had was Dominic Phillips. I'll just sum this up with, WTF. Dominic's mother, she went into the hospital for a procedure on her liver. Should have been a very, very minor procedure. 2 days, discharged, post-op, discharged to home. She dies at home. 2 days post-op, the medical examiner determined without an autopsy that she died of natural causes. Dominic wasn't buying it. His family wasn't buying it. Nobody was buying it. So again, he also paid for a private autopsy. And the autopsy found that there was indeed a botched surgical procedure on one of the ducts where they were trying to repair it surgically. So again, was this cover-up? Is this criminal? How can these things go unaccounted for? How can there be no accountability for actions like this? And, our program, our goal is not to bring down healthcare in Florida. Far from it. I've made a career in healthcare. I've been in healthcare for 50 years. My favorite people are in healthcare. I respect it and I love it. What we want to do is make it safer. If when instances like this happen, there's no litigation, then there's no accountability. And it's just that simple. Okay, now for the coming legislative session, we have some action plans. Could you bring up the different websites and locations that the people that want information about our movement? Okay, well this is my website, and that talks about my book, and here we have the website for FloridaFreeKill.com, the website for the Florida Medical Rights Organization, and on Facebook we have 2 new things. We have Florida Medical Rights Association on Facebook, and we also have the Healthcare Accountability Initiative. If you want to follow, if you want to help, if you want to get involved, please. As we said before, you know, politicians, they understand money and they understand numbers. Now, we may not have the money. We don't have the kind of money that these lobbyists do for the AMA and the Florida Medical Association and the Florida Hospital Association. We may not have that kind of money, but we are developing the numbers. And in a show very, very soon, we're going to have some additional information on that, and it's a blockbuster, I assure you. Okay, I'm going to close this. Thank you all. I see the numbers going up on the way we're being followed. It's climbing at all these different locations. Soon we will have sites up on TikTok. We will have sites up on X. I'm trying to learn Substack, and I'm functionally illiterate with computer issues, but thank God I've got a team here at AMP2 that can pull my weight. So, thank you again. Thank you for joining us. We will be seeing you again soon. God bless.
Thank you for watching The Fight Against Free Kill Laws with Ed Salazar, where we interview those who have dealt firsthand with medical malpractice. Families are devastated by medical malpractice and left with no justice. This isn't just a loophole. It's a failure to protect the ones we love. It's time to change the law. It's time for accountability. Contact your state legislatures, visit afreekill.com for more information on how to help, or contact Ed at 561-239-2417. Because every life should matter.
You're listening to A Fight Against